Senior lecturer in urban planning at Gävle University. You're going to talk about challenges and possibilities of shared automated transportation in connection to urban planning. Is it a transportation or a planning issue? And how do we embrace the new one experiences from self-driving cars and shared mobility in the education of urban planning? So the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Clara. Thank you. Yes, so I'm Jakob Nobuoka, and well, to start with, maybe we should look at these global trends that we all know so much about already. I just find some figures about this. This could be interesting to start with here. For instance, over the last decade, natural disaster affected more than 220 million people and caused economic damage for about $100 per year. The climate change is a huge issue that we all have to think about when we speak about transit, traffic, transportation, and urban planning. 20 million people live along coastlines, less than 5 meters above sea level. Quality of air, 97% of the cities in the developing countries do not meet air quality standards, and 49% in the developed world. And these are all figures from the UN, and they estimate that in 2050, 70% of the global population will live in cities, and 60% of the built environment is still to be built. So we have a large changing urban fabric to look forward to. So this will be a huge challenge, of course, but also a lot of opportunities to change our cities in a positive way, I think. And you could also add these kinds of pictures about the future, perhaps, but it's not future, it's not science fiction any longer. It's the world that we are living in and we're coming closer to anyway. What we have here, we have things like automated vehicles, shared automated, what did you call it? Shared automated transit? Something like that in your presentation, right? Yeah. So that's one thing, IoT, Internet of Things, that internet and all sorts of digital solutions are getting more integrated into our daily lives, I mean, with all the smartphones we have around us, but also infrastructure for the city to support all these systems is a huge thing. And I mean, there's a lot of discussion about automation today and how robots, all sorts of robots, will affect our daily life, and it will probably lead us toward a lot of changes. We could think of the city center, for instance, with a lot of office spaces. If we have a larger part of the work done in the service sector today will be automated, how will that affect the city center with all its offices and so on? So I think this is important to think of when we speak about shared transport solutions. I think the most important concept that I want to put forward today is that we should have a more holistic view on urban planning and a more holistic view on how to solve transport issue. So what is this, a holistic view? I can perhaps mention that later, but I mean, it's nothing new, as we saw in Magnus' presentation. It's nothing new to think, or in Peter's presentation as well, to think about this. Another example could be this one. Eugène Hénard, about 100 years ago, worked as an architect or urban planner, what you could say, in Paris. And Paris faced a lot of problems at that time with a growing number of vehicles in the streets. And he tried to solve this. I mean, we had, of course, people walking around, horse carriages. We had new technologies like the trains or the streetcars or whatever it could be. Some more innovative things like bicycles or Zeppeliner or whatever, the metro, the subway in the Paris. And so he tried to develop new ways of solving the traffic issue of Paris. And he specifically focused on roundabouts as a solution to build more safe roads and also build a better flow into the city. So he sort of developed the today's way of seeing at roundabouts, which is quite popular here in Sweden, anyway, right? But anyway, he was part of an older way of looking at urban planning. In his education, it was more about art and design, and a lot of the things he did was about beautification, how to make the city more beautiful. So this was his standpoint, so his viewpoint in this. So the real solution to the traffic issues was, of course, this. And you mentioned Le Corbusier before, Magnus. You sit there. But also more revolutionary ideas came from, for instance, the Italian futurists, who completely wanted to change the whole way of thinking of urbanity. And it was these kinds of ideas that eventually led us to the society or the city that we have today, focusing on cars, focusing on separating different kind of transportation from each other. And it, of course, was for the time being perhaps the only way or a good way to solve these problems in. I think what's interesting in this is that instead of just going with the old ways of doing things, they had to find completely new ways. So they had to rethink the whole city. That was the important thing here. And what else? If you think of higher education, they kept the artist part of being an urban planner, but they also brought in the industrial process and knowledge about technology and material. Both being a designer and being a craftsman was important for instance, the Bauhaus movement in Germany. If we think of how the cities look like today, this is pictures from Sweden, of course, but I think there's, I've heard it, a lot of other places around the world have the same ideas, but we have concepts like diversity, shared space, sustainability, walkability, transport-oriented development, and so on. This is how we try to build cities today. It gives us an idea of how a lot of people want to live today and tries to give new ideas for how the society could be built. So if I try to think about the education around this, higher education, the discussions today, at least here in Sweden, could be pinpoint something like this, like citizen participation is extremely important. It's what you have to think about first when you do urban planning, to involve the people that are going to live in the cities. You have to engage different kind of stakeholders, not only the municipality, but it has to be politicians and companies and civil society and whatever it could be. You have to focus on mobility, not on cars specifically. So you have to think broader about what is traffic, of course. You have to mix urban planning and mobility planning. That was what you were talking about, Magnus, perhaps. First think about mobility and then perhaps about the rest of the built environment, who knows. And maybe also rethink the urban space. So, what is a more holistic take on urban planning and perhaps also traffic planning, and how should this be handed over to the next generation of urban planners and traffic planners? I think the idea here is to be a bit more broader. It's not only about designing the cities, not only about bringing new technologies into the cities, but it's also to think about social resilience, concepts like segregation and so it's important to think of when you start with urban planning. Environmental necessities, biodiversity, for instance, extremely important to think of when you plan cities and also build your traffic solutions. There has to be an economic awareness of what you're doing, a long-term economic awareness of what you're doing. But also, of course, think of the technological change that we have coming in the future and happening right now. We have to take that in, think about that when we do this, and that the design perhaps is more focused on the people that is going to live in the cities. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.